And you? Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, thank you so much for those of you staying to listen to this talk. I know there's so many exciting talks happening in parallel, so I'm really humbled by your decision. A little bit about myself. My name is Adriana Nabor. I am originally from Romania, but I live in Australia now, where I'm conducting my PhD at the School of Mathematics at the Queensland University of Technology. And I also have the opportunity to be the project lead of Project AIMS, which stands for AI Against Modern Slavery at MILA, the Cubic Institute of AI. So the main point that I'm going to discuss today is hoping to use this stage that I've been given to create a little bit more awareness about the crime of modern slavery and how we can work and accelerate our work to eradicate it, assisted by cutting-edge technology. So this presentation brings together the world of AI and modern slavery. And while I know that AI is the reason why we are all here in Amsterdam, it's my turn to ask you to raise your hand because I'm actually curious to hear how many of you in this room have heard about the term modern slavery or you're quite confident about what it means. Okay, this is actually pretty exciting to see so many of you having a base in this, but today I'm going to present some more insights and updates, and my goal is to hopefully get some of you to think about ways in which you can get involved and bring your skills and knowledge into this fight. So let's get started. Well, at this summit today and a lot tomorrow, we're going to learn about the application of AI for social good. The way AI can help us work towards the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030. And the questions there will be, where would the fight against modern slavery fit into this general agenda? Where it is under the SDG 8, target 8.7, that calls upon all states, and I quote, to take immediate and effective measures to eradicate forced labor and modern slavery and human trafficking, and secure the prohibition and elimination of the worst form of child labor, including the recruitment and use of child torture, and by 2025, end child labor in all its forms. Well, we are almost at the end of 2022, so under such an urgent deadline, we need to understand, first, how does modern slavery look today? What are stakeholders doing to eradicate it? And what are the opportunities that we have to use cutting-edge technology, such as AI, in the fight against it? So let's begin. What is modern slavery? If you have not heard about the term modern slavery, I'm quite sure you have heard about human trafficking. But widely more recognized, the term human trafficking is only a subset of modern slavery. Because modern slavery is defined as a situation of exploitation that a person cannot refuse or leave because of threats, violence, coercion, deception, and abuse of power. So surely it can be manifested in the form of human trafficking, but it also can take form of forced labor, bonded labor, debt bondage, descendant-based slavery, domestic servitude, forced labor, forced and early marriages, slavery-like practices, organ harvesting, and more. So what causes modern slavery? Simply put, modern slavery is the exploitation of vulnerabilities. It thrives at the exploitation of those most in need of protection, putting our children, migrants, and refugees at the top of those most likely to become victims. Slavery flourishes where there is poverty, discrimination against marginalized groups, a weak rule of law, and instabilities brought by war, conflict, and natural disasters. Those are just a few causes. Without the right safety measures in place, vulnerable people who are looking for stability and safety, they fall prey to perpetrators and their false hopes and offers. So when the epidemic of modern slavery meets a global pandemic, an unprecedented natural disasters, and what they used to be unimaginable wars, the need to discuss and address these issues and protect the most vulnerable could not be more urgent. Therefore, the opportunity to present and create awareness on such a global stage, such as the World Summit AI, is most welcome. And the reason for this is because, unfortunately, the numbers will show us that while modern slavery is truly a very hard crime to measure because it's a hidden crime, The World Free Foundation, in partnership with the International Labour Organization, International Migration Organizations, they have taken on this task and they're publishing estimates of modern slavery. And the most recent estimates, they were published only a few days ago. And they show us that there are over 50 million people in a situation of exploitation in any given day in 2021. More shockingly is that this showcases an increase of 10 million people since our latest estimates of 2017. So not only that we are not making progress, things are getting worse for the reason presented above. Out of the 50 million people that are enslaved today, almost 28 million are in forced labor and 22 million in forced marriages. And we know that forced labor can be state-imposed. But what these new global estimates show us is that, in fact, over 86% of forced labor is linked to the private sector. In reality, 17.6 million people, 0.3 million people, are in forced labor in private sector, other sectors apart from commercial sexual exploitation. What this means is that they are feeding directly into the supply chain of big corporations, into the products and services that you and I are consuming every day, and therefore is making us directly connected to this crime. So modern slavery is not just a moral crime, it is an economic crime. Forced labor happens in every region of the globe and in all sectors. Modern slavery continues to grow because of lack of market pressures and regulations. In 2014, we had an estimate that modern slavery was generated over 150 billion US dollars per year. And we believe this number has increased, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. And the way Professor Kevin Dales puts it, it's now cheaper than ever to trade in human beings. And people do not enslave people to be mean to them, but they're rather doing this for a profit. So we really need to understand then, what are governments and businesses doing to ensure that their products and services are not linked to this crime, and therefore that we are not contributing with our dollar to this crime. Therefore, we need transparency. But before being able to create transparency, we need to explain to businesses that there is a business case in creating transparency in supply chain. Because for businesses, identifying modern slavery in supply chain is not only going to increase the company's credibility with the environmental social government, the ESG compliance, but it's also going to create a more resilient supply chain. The company will make sure that it will not incur vast fines, it will not lose investment, they will not lose consumer trust, and they will not face legal actions. So we would have hoped that the moral nature of addressing modern slavery in supply chain would have been sufficient for companies to take action. But unfortunately, self-regulation is simply not moving fast enough. So governments had to step in. And the first government to do so was the UK, with the publication of the Modern Slavery Act in 2015. This legislation required big corporations to publish one statement per year where they describe the structure of their supply chain and they explain the steps they're taking to make sure that slavery is not part of that. They're asking companies to talk about the training to their employees, if they have a whistleblower policy, their risk assessment, identification, management, and more. And since then, we have seen a domino effect of such legislation being passed. Australia passed the Modern Slavery Act in 2018, and we have similar legislation even here in the Netherlands, in France, in Germany, and now in the pipeline, similar legislation is being considered in Canada, in New Zealand, and even at the European Union level, we are looking now at passing a mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence legislation. And all these legislative acts have this element of reporting in common. They're asking companies to publish these statements. And if we ask the companies to publish statements, then we have an obligation to analyze these statements. Because documenting the impact of the new legislative acts is an indispensable tool if we want, first of all, to improve the effectiveness of the legislation and, most importantly, to advance the business practices. What is more, these reports are now a great window for us to understand what companies are doing. And this is no proxy data. This data comes directly from the companies. So there are initiatives out there, such as the one led by Walk Free Foundation and WikiLate, where they're trying to take samples of those reports and analyze them. But they're doing this analysis manually. And what we have learned from their experience, they've been doing this work for over 6 years, is that it takes approximately 1 hour to manually assess and validate one of these statements. But in the UK alone, we have over 17,000 statements published each year, 5,000, for instance, available from Australia. And each year we have thousands of reports, therefore, that rest unanalyzed, and we are unable to understand the real level of compliance. So while the publication of corporate statements has offered a great capacity to hold businesses to account, and even more importantly, to celebrate the businesses that are doing well, that are leading the industry, it has created this new challenge. And that challenge is that the external parties, the governments, and the NGOs, they do not have the right capacity to have the time to go through and analyze meaningfully and timely the increasing volume of the statements. And therefore, automatizing this process is the only way if we want to achieve accountability and transparency at scale. And this is where Project AIMS entered the stage. Project AIMS, as a background, it started as an idea back in school. As a social scientist student, I was interested in how can I use my statistics skills as well to unlock the content of these statements and see if we can put all these statements together and observe any patterns. And this is when I learned how to code, and I built the first prototype for Project AIMS. I had the chance since then to work with the Future Society and with the Walk Free Foundation to scale this project and became what Project AIMS is today, which Project AIMS collected all the statements that were published at the time in the UK, and we really focused on the data collection and data extraction, which in this case is the text, and we look for specific metrics that can give us an indication if a company is compliant or not with the UK Modern Slavery Act. So, for instance, we dive into these documents and we look for these particular characteristics, if the document is signed and approved by the board, if the company has described the risk assessment of mitigation, or if they have training or whistleblowing policies. Project AIMS is truly responding to the need of creating monitoring and analysis, effective monitoring and analysis of the modern slavery statements. And our intent is simply to speed up the time it takes to governments and analysts and NGOs to read these statements. So therefore, their teams can spend their time in more cognitively interested tasks. Project AIMS seems to capture the potential of artificial intelligence to help solve pressing issues. The goal is twofold. One, we want to empower civic society and legislators to hold businesses to account. And second, to pave the way for new ways of public policy and legislation, which embraces the full potential of cutting-edge technology, such as AI. So we have three main objectives. First, it is to build an open source tool. We want to have all this information available for the NGOs or the companies and governments that are interested in the statement and to analyze them, to decrease the time it takes to their team. Secondly, we want to provide policymakers and legislators a greater understanding of how these methods can then be applied in other contexts, such as other non-financial reporting initiatives. And thirdly, because modern slavery is such a complex crime, we want to bring people with diverse discipline into the fight against modern slavery and into the use of AI for social good at large. So we are very proud to say that Project AIMS and this first phase that has been looking at the UK statement is now open source and it's available on GitHub. So I encourage all of you to go and check all the information that is available there. And you can see all the experiments that we have run and also all the learnings and recommendations that we collected in this phase. To summarize the high-level recommendations, we have really tried to put forward recommendations both for policymakers and also for the governments and companies. On one hand, for policymakers, we ask them that each year, any government that has a modern slavery act or is in the process of looking at passing one, that they should publish a comprehensive list of all the companies that are covered by this legislation. What this means for us as a data point, it means that we know what data we need to analyze that year. Secondly, we ask legislators to create a centralized registry or where all these statements are going to be collected. That means that instead of us now going and searching for this information on all the companies' websites, we have all the data in one place. For companies, on the other hand, we advise them to assist the government in this process of sending the documents to this centralized registry. And most importantly for us is that we ask companies to publish these statements in machine-readable formats. Because the time and money that we are spending at the moment to extract text from complex PDF and infographics, we could simply give them into more impactful work. So where this project aims now and where it's going next? At the moment, we are taking the project into a more research direction. We are very excited to now take the project into a second phase in collaboration between the Queensland University of Technology and NILA, but also in discussions with the Australian government, because now, moving forward, we're going to look at the Australian modern slavery statements. And we are also very lucky to have the opportunity to work with our long-term collaborators, the Future Society, Wikirate and WalkFree, and build upon all the learnings that we accumulated through the process of the analysis of the UK modern slavery statement. We have a paper now in the process, and in this paper we are moving a little bit from the data collection and text extraction towards more the learnings for the data annotation, and we are building upon a project evaluation that the senior researchers from NILA have done on the previous work, putting forward pathways of machine learning research that we will explore. So please stay tuned and check on our GitHub all the updates once the paper is going to be published. So just before I conclude, I would like first of all to thank you all for being here today and listening to this talk. For me, the fact that you have decided to come to listen to this talk is a reassurance that more people are starting to pay attention to the crime of modern slavery, which exploits our most vulnerable. As modern slavery is an extremely complex and urgent crime, we need more people to join the fight. As I said, I'm a social scientist interested in statistics, and the way I succeeded to come into this work is by looking at those statements. I believe that regardless of your background and expertise, there is a place for you to join this fight. So I will be around for the next 2 days to answer all your questions, and if you're interested, we can brainstorm the way of you to get involved. So once again, thank you so much, and I look forward to answer all your questions. Thank you.
Wow, that is just so incredibly impressive. Thank you so much, Adriana. That's just wonderful. I have a question to get us started, and that is, you talked a little bit about what governments are doing with regard to the legislation that's been put into place around modern slavery and otherwise. I'm sure there are different ways in which governments have responded. How do you view that work, and what impact do you think it's having?
Thank you. Well, at the national level, the UK was the first government to pass this type of legislation. And at that point in 2050, it was truly revolutionary, because what it did, it created the opportunity to have discussions about this issue. But unfortunately, what we've noticed is that that legislation didn't have quite a lot of teeth, the way we like to say, because in reality, the UK legislation only required companies to publish a statement that is signed on their website. So it could be an empty page or something saying, we don't have slavery, thank you very much, signed by the board on the website, and they are compliant with the legislation. Well, the legislation is now under review, but what we have observed, however, is that the governments that followed, they have learned from all this feedback that the civic society and everybody were providing to the UK. So when the Australian legislation comes to place, they're not only asking for a document with signature, they're also asking companies to include 6 clear mandatory criteria that the company needs to discuss. And what is important here in Australia is that the Australian modern slavery team has an obligation once a year to provide a report to the Australian Parliament explaining the level of compliance, which means concretely that their team have to go to all these documents, read them, which for us translates into a clear need to automatize the process, which was missing in UK. And finally, a few more years passed, and now, as I mentioned, the European Union is looking at passing a mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence legislation. So hopefully in the future, companies will not only publish statements saying what they're doing, but they will also provide supporting evidence to make sure to prove that what they're saying is true. So we're moving in the right direction in this too, but it takes a little bit of time.
No progress. It is
Progress
happening.
has been.
It is happening. Okay, well, I think we'll conclude there because we need to move on. But please do find Adriana over the next couple of days and be in touch with all of your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, my friends, it's hard to believe, but we have almost come to the end of the Talent Lab at this year's event. But here to see us out, oh yes, I do see you, Mariah, I do see you back there. I'm thrilled to welcome our next speaker to the stage. He taught me this morning about the